Hi, I'm Mary Greendale, and welcome to another Just Thinking. Today we're going to talk about sustainability. Now, this is a word that we hear related to any number of things. In this particular case, it's related to a warrant article that's coming up at the annual town meeting. Town meeting is on May 6th. It starts on May 6th. If we were to go to another night, it would go the next night. Anyway, we have a panel here today to discuss the warrant article regarding hiring a sustainability coordinator. So let's turn to my guests today. I have three folks with me, Joan, Rich, and Dawn, but I'm going to ask them to please introduce yourself and tell us how you got into this racket.
Yes. Hi, I'm Joan Levinsohn, and I retired as a teacher 2 years ago, and I was looking for some volunteer organization to do something good for the town, and I came across 350.org, and I've been very concerned about climate change and the effects that it's having on our Earth. So I decided to put my energies into this organization, 350.org, and we came up with this idea of a sustainability coordinator to reduce our carbon footprint.
Okay. Rich?
I'm Rich Rosenberry. I became very active 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, got involved with 350.org, and short time after that there was a more local 350 group organized in this area, Sherburne and Holliston, and I've been involved with them since. I've been an environmentalist all my life and a fan of Bill McKibben, who started 350.
Okay. And Dawn?
Yeah, I'm Dawn Durning-Hammond. I also live in town. I want to say that our local group is called Upper Charles Climate Action, which is kind of maybe a more recognizable name depending on whether people have seen our posts and materials. But, you know, I'm a mom and my children are young adults and they think about starting their own families. And it's a scary future that we're facing with climate change and climate disruption. And I'm still working and I do various other things. But basically the time that I have to do kind of advocacy and public activism I put into this because I think there's just nothing more important than preserving a healthy climate for ourselves and future generations. So that's why I'm here.
Great, great. Well, I'm really glad that all of you were available on such short notice. So as I said, we have a warrant article, and I want to start, sort of the beginning of how does it come that we have, what is this article about? And I don't know which one of you wants to take the lead on that. Who was the first one involved with this whole conversation? Why don't we start there?
The conversation
among you, who of the three of you was the first one involved with a conversation about the coordinator?
Oh, came up, I guess it was myself. We have subcommittees at our node, and I was working with the 100% Sustainability Subcommittee. And through discussion, 350 is a grassroots organization, and we were trying to figure out at the town level what we could do to try to reduce our carbon footprint and try to go towards 100% sustainability. And we came up as a group with this idea of having Sherburne and Holliston look into hiring a full-time coordinator between the two towns. So it would be a part-time coordinator for Holliston and a part-time coordinator for Sherburne, and it would be a combined position.
Okay, one person, two. Okay.
Yes,
good.
for the two towns.
Okay.
And then we started to, discuss ways of how, this would look, and what the article would look like, what the position would look like, and we started to just reach out to all the other towns that have sustainability coordinators, and there's about 40 different towns that have that, and started getting information about that, what they do in their job, and what their salary is, and different aspects of their position.
Okay, now I know you held I don't know if it was a workshop or a conversation, I don't know, but there was a meeting last week in Sherburne.
Panel discussion.
Panel discussion,
yes.
Yeah. Okay, and I did watch that, and for the audience here, that is available on the Holliston Cable Access Television site. So that's hcat.org, hcattv.org, or maybe not, but whatever. Anyway, for that night, the panel was made up of people who currently hold sustainability coordinator positions in 4 different communities. None of the communities was as small as Sherburne, and all of the communities were definitely, even though Concord's the same size as we are, Holliston's no Concord. Sure. Suffice it to say. But let's back up. So you got in touch with all of those folks. Now, locally, who did you get in touch with, Rich?
I believe there was a sustainability, maybe he's called an energy coordinator in Millis, very local. He's part-time.
And he works for
The town.
the town of?
Yes.
Okay.
He was a full-time coordinator in Medway, so they decided they decided in Medway to do a full-time coordinator, and then he went over to Millis to be a part-time coordinator. So
Oh.
those are 2 towns that are very local
yeah.
that have sustainability coordinators, or like you said, energy coordinators.
Can I just
Yes.
backing it up just a step so people understand the sort of thinking behind this. So the climate scientists tell us that we have basically 10 years to cut carbon emissions by half. That's a huge challenge. And when we looked at all the things one might do in town, it became clear to us that, it's great to have volunteer efforts, but for, our residents, our businesses, our town itself all need help and advice and expertise and organizing and, to have a shot at mounting the kind of effort that would get us to reduce our carbon impact by half in 10 years, when by the time today's kindergartners are 10th graders in this building at the high school, we need to have so much more solar. We need to have so many more electric vehicles and ways to charge them. We need to do so many things. And then between then and 2050, we have to get off carbon fuels completely. And that's to avoid the worst and most devastating effects of climate change and climate disruption. So, the idea that we could kind of do this with all volunteer labor around the edges just didn't seem realistic to us. And so that's how we thought we need some expertise right here in town to help us make this transition. And we also learned from all our research that these positions actually tend to bring in money to the town, which we can talk more about.
Yeah,
So,
that's a very
so there's a
large
sort of a potential real win-win here. So, but I wanted to say, why a person, why a coordinator? That's
Right.
it's because we have this huge task to do that is bigger than any one of us individually or even as a little volunteer group are going to be able to handle. So.
Well, and there is certain consistency that comes from having a centralized person.
Sure, and coordination, and
Right.
yeah.
Especially when you have, as we both do in our communities, silos within town government,
Right.
so that you want to make sure that the health board and that the Department of Public Works and so forth, that everybody is on the same page.
And the recommendation we've made is to have this position be reporting right to the town administrator, so that you would have, a view of all the departments and be able to work.
Well, that
Work
doesn't
that way.
really work, though, because he doesn't have any kind of authority over the Board of Health, and he has no authority over the Planning Board, and he has no authority,
Well, the folks that we talked to from other towns, their advice was that that's sort of the best place to park the position, because there is sort of access. I know there's not authority, but at least what was recommended to us, and again,
Yes.
we're not experts in
Right.
town government, but we're all pretty new to this actually, but the coordinators in other towns and the folks who supervise them all thought that was a good place to be. So that's why the recommendation is not in the town meeting warrant, but that's just the advice that we were given and that we've passed along.
Okay.
So.
All right. So in the town meeting warrant, it doesn't talk at all about who would do supervision. It doesn't talk about a dollar figure. In the motion, will you talk about a dollar figure? Will you change the article at all in the motion?
What do we?
We haven't talked about that. What we've recommended and what's in our PowerPoint is $30,000 salary for half-time plus 30% for benefits.
Now, our finance committee informed us that we're way off on the
way
benefits
off.
thing. I mean, I think we are less attached to a particular dollar amount or a particular format than we are to having the town make a commitment and draw the resources together to get somebody working on this. We hadn't talked about whether we want to modify. I mean, my understanding is that once it's printed on the warrant, you can't modify it except
You're not
at town meeting itself, right?
You could amend it
Yeah,
at town meeting.
At town meeting, yeah.
But at town meeting, you will be asked to give them a motion. And the
Right.
motion will be moved that the town meeting
Do X.
direct the Board of Selectmen to, and then the rest of the language is,
Right.
that, that would be what I'd assume,
Yeah.
unless you had
Yes.
something else you wanted
Yes.
to.
Well, so
add.
far, we haven't got any further strategy beyond that, although, we're still talking with people, things could evolve, but that's the plan at the moment.
So did you meet with any of the local officials along the way? Okay, so tell me what
We
that's
did.
been like.
Yeah, we've met at least twice with the select board, right? And their perspective is we want to have the first, so we have shown them graphs that I think will be worked into this before there's this thing that we're streaming before it's actually put up. But, of the towns that we researched, and we have a fairly extensive report called the Duffy Report on 4 of the towns, and then we got a hold of 5 or 6 others where we could get financial data. And these positions in these other towns that we were able to get data from have brought in, they've had a return on the investment in salaries and benefits of between 4 and 12%, because
4 and 12
these
times.
I'm sorry, times salary. I'm sorry, not percent. You're absolutely right, Rich.
Times the
4.5 times salary, or up to 12 times salary, and that's because these folks who do this work bring in grants to the town. They know the grant landscape. I mean, our town has done very well. Our town administrator has done very well with green community grants, and we so appreciate that. I mean, that's great. We have
done a lot.
no criticism there, except that we have to ramp this whole thing up much faster than we think he can do with his sort of slice of his big job. But anyway, the sustainability coordinators bring grants into their towns. They bring incentives they know about incentives from energy companies to take advantage of. They help the town to reduce the energy costs of the town itself, and of course help citizens save money because they also do programs for sustainability that relate to businesses and individual families and homes. So I kind of lost the beginning of my thread
Well, the question was
there.
the select board.
The select board, yes. So
their
the select
comments
board,
were-
they were not persuaded by the ROI because they said it was speculative, which of course it is. We don't know what would happen in our particular town if we were to do this. And so they said to us they would want to see the first year funded from a source outside the town budget and show what the word I think they used was proof of concept. So we proceeded to do a fair amount of research, and we have a couple possible ways that maybe this could get funded, but nothing is certain yet. We could talk more about those specific things we've explored if you want. So as of now, the selectmen are not supporting this because we haven't got external funding for it for the first year. And of course, our perspective is this position would probably make money, but even if the town were to need to spend money, they're actually, I don't want to sound dramatic, but there is nothing more important to spend it on because all the other things that we spend our money on in town will get much more difficult and costly if climate change ramps up to the point that it will if we just continue with business as usual. So, but anyway, the select board, they were very appreciative, they were respectful, they thought we'd done good work, but they were not persuaded that it makes sense to make this investment without a guaranteed return. So that's my
about the
understanding of
finance
where they
committee?
are now.
Same thing.
Basically the same story.
Okay. How about other departments? Have you talked, not departments, I mean elected boards like the Board of Health or the
We have not
Planning
done
Board?
that yet. There's
Okay.
we should tell you, there's about 6 or 7 of us, and we only
yes.
started this in January, so we
Yeah.
are, and most of us are still working. So,
Yeah, there are always
So
just
there's
a few
all
people that are
kinds of-
running around like crazy doing this.
there are many things we
Yes.
haven't done. We are new, we are learning, and we great to talk with the Board of Health and the Board of Education and any number of other folks that we just haven't gotten to yet.
And we've been networking a lot in town, and that's been
important.
really fulfilling,
Yeah, that's
for
an
all of us,
important part of
to meet people and find people who, ask questions and make suggestions. And that's-
Yeah, I'm sort of a process person, kind of a planner, and so I guess my question, the next question is, in a way, starting with the coordinator seems like, maybe a jump in as opposed to, do we all collectively in the community agree that there's an issue? And I know that, the folks at the table would say yes, but that's part of what's going to take place at town meeting, I would think, is that, we may get some conversation about whether or not these concerns are legitimate and how do they affect this town in particular. And I think that's where I'd like to just ask you a couple of more questions.
Sure.
One of my big things is the trees. Okay, now this is not something that everybody automatically thinks about for resource protection, But when it comes to carbon emissions, this one's a huge one. This one's a biggie. And I see coming from Sherburne even, they've lost a lot of trees as well. We've lost tons.
Yes.
We had a long drought. Then we had the winter moths for multiple years, and then the gypsy moths swooped in.
And then there's the big storms that knocked so many down.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we have just been battered.
Yeah.
Our forests, our tree belts, everything. Now, in your presentation or the panel the other night, there was some conversation about this. Some of the towns, in fact, they mentioned that there was a program specifically for sort of a reforestation
Yeah,
kind of thing.
that'd be great.
Yeah, so I think it's important in any presentation that you be clear about what kinds of things are you talking about. So let's go there. I just threw in the trees because I wanted to. What else are you talking about?
That a sustainability coordinator
Yeah.
can do. So yeah.
Is it the sustainability coordinator could do, or why we should care in Holliston
In
about
Holliston.
climate
Well,
change?
bringing it home, what
Yeah.
are the issues that this coordinator would be working on that are local, okay, that are very targeted locally? So what are the things? I mean, I heard them in the. It's not a fair question because I know the answer, but
That's why you're interviewing us, because you have ideas there.
but anyway. So what are the things that are pressing at a local level?
Well, we can reduce our carbon footprint locally there's 351 towns and cities in Massachusetts. If we do our share, we can, make things better.
How do we
in the
do
long
that?
run. Well, by Jeff Ritter has gotten us 2 electric cars and saved money, in addition to reducing the amount of carbon that goes into the atmosphere. We can reduce our use of electricity or change the source of the electricity to be renewable. I think right now, statewide, it's like 13% comes from renewable resources. If we get that up to 50% in 10 years, that would be great. But, people can put solar panels on their houses. There's programs. I know in Natick, the sustainability coordinator there has helped move the program along, and they got hundreds of people to put solar panels on their roofs at a discount as a group.
Solar panels is a big thing. If you expand it just from residents to also looking into all the municipalities having solar panels. I know Watertown has just done have just passed something that said that all new construction municipalities have to have solar panels to be renewable. So that's something, that would really reduce the carbon footprint. So, and looking into the schools, having, solar panels, if there is any new construction in schools or additions, that they would all have the solar panels. So.
I know that Jeff Ritter is also looking at, or there's been a whole effort to get a contract, a private developer to come and put the solar panels up at the former dump.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's
landfill.
awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing about
there's
a website called Drawdown, which looks very closely at all the different things one can do to try, what is it going to take globally to reduce the carbon in the atmosphere to the point where it'll be sustainable and we'll all have reasonably healthy lives without huge climate disruption. And rooftop solar comes in about number 6 out of 100 in terms of the efficiency, for the cost for what it costs to, and the cost is going down all the time. It's a huge impact on carbon. So that is one thing I would agree with you. But in terms of other things that the town could do, I think there are many. I mean, there's the ongoing effort for just energy efficiency and conservation I think there's still a lot of room, both in terms of municipal buildings, but also in terms of residential and commercial buildings in town. Curbside composting is another example. I don't know if we will ever get there, but you can actually save a lot of money from the waste stream if you can first of all, encourage people's backyard composting and also think in terms of curbside. That takes a lot of weight out of the waste stream and takes a lot of carbon out of the air because that gets sequestered because it goes into the soil and then the trees eat it up and your trash is making new trees and plants instead of being hauled off to get burned and the carbon.
Well, when I first moved here, it was all collected
Was
from
it
the
really?
garbage pails in the backyard, walk around, get a garbage pail, and they'd take it off, and they'd feed the animals and piggeries and that kind of thing.
I mean, in terms of how climate change is going to affect Holliston and why we should care, there's a way that we've just been lucky so far. I mean, if you think about the cost of a position like this, and it might or might not seem like a big amount of money, but the cost of climate disruption is kind of incalculable. I mean, what's been the cost to Joplin, Missouri after their tornado, or to Paradise after the fires? I mean, so far we haven't had major storms. The closest real climate-affected major storms have been like on the North Shore, where there was all that flooding a few years ago because the tides had gotten so much higher.
And in Boston,
and in Boston,
flooding with the subway. But
yeah. So it's sort of, we can only expect more of that sort of thing, and it will hit Holliston sooner or later in one form or another. So that's why it behooves us to do what we can as a town to minimize this climate change effect.
The state of Massachusetts in the IPCC report, and there were two big reports that came out last fall. There was one international and one national. And Massachusetts in the future will have more rainfall than it's had in the past. So I think that's something that we should be more aware of. And we have a lot of dams in Holliston.
And many of them
I think that's a concern.
Causes, issues about them. So.
And one thing that some sustainability coordinators have done is to get grants to help with dams. So that's a very specific Holliston need that could be.
And we have explored that in the past. In
Yeah.
fact, we've had grants to do some of that.
Yeah.
You had talked about the trees and all the issue, and
Right.
that is a direct thing of climate change, that we're getting more rain and the trees are getting weaker and the storms are getting stronger. I mean, the wind and the recent couple of months with the windstorms that are coming through, and all the tree damage from that, and that's all affecting Holliston, and you can see it all over. For sure.
Yeah, well, that one's a way big one, because it's also just how the predatory bugs have invaded.
Yeah.
And there are some things you can't turn the clock back on.
No, the changing habitats we're stuck with at this point.
And,
Yeah.
But what I'm hearing is just the big question for me is, how do you engage the rank and file person? I mean, you're talking about a part-time coordinator at 18, 19, 20 hours, whatever the magic number is in the course of a week, times 50.
Well, I think you start. I mean, if it were, you could conceivably have, every town could have a whole army of people to work on this, and it wouldn't be a bad thing. It's just that we don't have the resources to start out that way. But I think people get more engaged when they realize there is something they can do. I mean, I know all kinds of people who are really worried about this stuff, but just, life is distracting and busy,
and
it's depressing.
It's a big thing.
And it's a huge thing.
It's so big. It's
really
like,
but
I don't know.
And it's easy to feel numb and powerless, but the truth is there is so much that we can do.
Right. And whenever you have a big problem like that, any little thing any individual does makes an impact. And that's what people forget. If I do this, it's just a little something. And everything adds up. It really does.
Now, you talked about a website drawdown.
Yeah, that's nothing to do with our particular organization, but it's one that I've gone to as a resource. And it's interesting. You'll find all kinds of interesting things there in terms of what affects carbon emissions globally. I mean, there are things on that list like educate girls. Turns out if you educate girls, that has a really big impact on climate. And I would have to do more research to know how. But it does, yeah. Maybe because girls are then less likely to be, cooking food. I mean, I could speculate cooking food over smoky fires instead of having jobs. But anyway, it really looks very kind of almost scientifically at this will take this many tons out of the atmosphere over time, and so it kind of helps you see where to where in terms of policy, large scale policy, where to put one's efforts.
I'm picturing in my mind the old thermometers for fundraising, and it's kind of that.
Yeah, it's like the thermometer in
reverse.
reverse.
Something in reverse.
Absolutely.
That's basically saying, this is what we're doing now. Our goal is to get here. And here are the ways that we could reach that goal.
Yep, all these different ways.
And somebody said 100 different ways. You said that there were.
I mean, there are many. I mean, I actually, enjoy my occasional chicken, but not eating meat is a good way to reduce your carbon impact. And of course, transportation is a huge sector, and our rep, Carolyn Dykema, at this point is working on a kind of, is it a regional transportation plan that would be, among other things, a reduction in emissions. It would also involve a lot of new jobs. It's awesome. But electric cars, you can run your car on sun and wind, but we need to have more infrastructure for charging them. So that's another potentially very local effort that could make a difference to people.
Yeah, fossil fuels are, I mean, there's like 3 sectors to be concerned about with fossil fuels. One is what's generating electricity, transportation, and then
Heating, maybe?
heating, yes. And, you know, to me, the heating is, you know, I know we have oil heat at home, and you know, that's going to be a tough transition to make. You know, and oil and gasoline contribute more to climate change than natural gas. Natural gas is cleaner, burns without pollution, but it still creates carbon in the atmosphere.
Right. Well, yeah, wow.
Yes,
It is after a while that you just want to pull the cover over your head and say, oh my gosh, we'll think about that one tomorrow.
You know, many of us feel that way, I think, and it's also true that, like I mentioned, my young adult children, I'm not willing to leave them alone with this problem, right? That's what keeps me coming at it. Like, yes, I get discouraged, and then I unload to my friends about how discouraged I am, and then I think, okay, what can we do today? Because that's what's going to get us out of this mess. Right.
What is the choice? You know, it's that kind of thing.
We all have children, you know, if you have children and if you're going to have grandchildren, you know, you feel obligated to leave, you know, a planet for them that's a healthy planet. And, you know, not to have them inherit a really, you know, a planet who's really suffering. I wanted to mention about the school system and how a sustainability coordinator could really work closely with the schools. And I do know they have a nice curriculum, I guess, in the junior high that weaves in about, you know, doing sustainability projects and learning about sustainability. And, you know, all of these students that need to be educated. And I know that sustainability coordinators could work very closely with the school system and, you know, and do practical things like doing composting in the schools and getting rid of the styrofoam trays. And I think they're heading towards that. But there's a, you know, a lot of things that can be done within the school system.
All right. So does anybody think we've overlooked anything? Is there something we've left out of this conversation that you'd like to add before we call it a night?
Well, I don't know that we've emphasized quite enough. You mentioned the language of we're leaving money on the table, Rich.
Yes.
We haven't mentioned quite enough, I don't think, that having somebody really attuned to what the opportunities are out there, working on behalf of our town, could bring in more resources to our town to help deal with this stuff. Do you want to say a little more about that?
Yeah, one of the coordinators at the panel discussion towards the end, and he said any town that doesn't have a coordinator is leaving money on the table. And, you know, in regards to that, I thought of the other day that we're paying state taxes and goes to the state, and then the state has these grants. If those grants are going to other towns, we're financing other towns' sustainability, right? I mean, that's not bad.
Which is a good thing, but, you know.
But let's keep our money here and do, you know, working for ours. I know that both Speaker DeLeo and Governor Baker have each proposed a little bit different plans, but $1 billion over the next 10 years in grants to cities and towns in the state. If we have a coordinator already on board that can go after those grants when they first start, we're in good shape, you know. We can get our share.
Yep, I can tell you that the more that get involved, the chances of getting a grant diminish because the competition goes up. And having spent a lot of my professional career in government doing grants and then writing grants for people who were applying, you need specialists. Okay, so my specialty was agriculture. Other people have different specialties. That might be human services with particular, you know, bent. It could be autism. It doesn't matter what okay. You really do need to know the jargon. You need to know, you know, crossing the T's and dotting the I's. Absolutely. And really understanding what the programs are doing. You really do need somebody that knows it and does it, you know, regularly.
And match up the town's needs with what's out there. And,
right.
I mean, and again, this is no criticism at all of our current town officials. They've done well. But we can't,
very well.
You know, and it's fabulous. And there's a need to accelerate the whole process.
Let's help them and
increase it.
And increase it. I'm not sure that you will get the results that you want at this town meeting, but I really, really am optimistic that you will start a conversation.
Yeah.
And that this conversation will very soon, become sort of broader.
Yeah, our sense is that, first of all, we're using this opportunity to do so much, as you mentioned, networking and connecting with people and getting a whole, learning what other groups in town are working on environmental issues
Sure.
and trying to pull folks together. And of course, this is a long-term project.
Yeah.
So however this goes, we're just going to keep going and figure out what the next step is. We hope people will come to town meeting, and we hope that they'll vote for this because I think it really is in everyone's interest. But we know it's relatively new organizing effort, and things sometimes take longer. So I do want to, however, welcome anybody who's listening. We hope you'll come. I don't know which camera I'm supposed to be looking at, but we hope that you'll come. We hope you'll speak and vote in favor of this. But if not, ask questions. And if you have concerns, find us, ask us questions, because we really want to be having the conversation, and we want to be helping people. We all need to kind of face and deal with and reconcile somehow ourselves to this huge, like the biggest challenge really in our lifetimes, and each of us needs to figure out how to come to terms with that, and how to be responsible citizens in response to it. So this is our way. This is an invitation. We hope people will join us. So.
Yep, everybody needs to own a piece of it.
Yeah. It's a big enough problem for all of us.
Right.
Oh yes,
It is.
Yeah, it is.
It is.
And there's something that each of us can do, which is the good side, as you were saying, Joan. Everybody.
Or right now, come and vote.
That's a step.
Step number one. All right.
Thanks
well, thank
so
you so
much.
much for joining me. I
Thank you
appreciate
so
it.
much.
And a reminder that the town meeting is on May 6th. It starts at 7:30 here at the high school in the auditorium. And this article is way at the end of the warrant.
33.
Just like planning things are always at the end of the warrant. But at any rate, I won't go down that path. The bottom line is, please don't be tempted to leave before the end. You may have some other things that you think were particularly important, but stay to the end, participate in the discussion, and do your part. So thanks so much. See you next time.